In this video, I am going to share with you some of my favorite soft plastic rigging hacks, and it doesn't matter if you just now got into fishing or if you have been fishing for 40 or 50 years, there is something that you're going to learn in this video that you didn't know before. So call them tips, call them tricks, call them hacks, it doesn't matter. It's going to help you save some more money, stop wasting lures, and catch more fish. So I'm going to stop talking, let's get right into it. Now, this is one of my favorite tips when it comes to rigging soft plastics on a jig head. This is going to save you a ton of money, and you're not going to go through so many lures this way. Now, when you're dealing with these jig heads, especially the barb jig heads, these barbs do a good job of holding the lure in place. The only problem with them is they do a lot of damage as you're inserting the lure onto that jig head. When you slide it up there, it does a lot of damage to it. So this little trick right here is going to make these last a lot longer. So we're going to start out, it's not going to be any different. We're just going to go ahead and thread that hook point right through the lure, and then we're going to drive the hook point out the back. And then right here, nothing's changed. So normally what happens in this situation is people are just going to go ahead and run the soft plastic right up that jig head. But what happens is these little barbs right here, they cut grooves in the plastic, and that's what causes that lure to slide back and forth. So what we're going to do that's going to be different is we're going to take this lure head and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees, and then we're going to go ahead and push it on up. And then once we get it pushed up, we're going to rotate it back into place. This is called a 90-degree load. I didn't get that exactly perfect, but it'll do for a demonstration. But what happens is the plastic that's in front of those barbs is now it hasn't been cut. It's brand new. It doesn't have any grooves in it. So this lure is going to stay in place a lot longer. You're going to be able to catch more fish with this lure, and you're not going to go through so many of them. So not only is it going to save you money, you're not going to be as wasteful, and that pack of lures is going to last a lot longer. So that's called the 90-degree load, and I recommend you highly, if you're using jig heads, to start rigging your lures that way. This tip is all about getting better hook sets when you're using your soft plastic lure. So a lot of people, when they're brand new to rigging soft plastics weedless, what they're going to do is they're going to insert this hook through the bottom at a 45-degree angle, and it's going to look something like this. Now, the problem with doing that is it looks good on the hook, but you have a lot of plastic to drive that lure through in order for it to penetrate the fish's mouth. So what I want you to do instead is I want you to go through the body of the lure at a 90-degree angle, and what we're going to do to find that right distance, we're going to put our thumb right there on the lure where we want that hook to go through. Then I'm going to take the hook and I'm going to put it right there through where my thumb is at, and I'm going to drive that hook from the bottom straight through the top right there. And then at this point, we've got our hook at the top. It's rigged up right, but we want to make it weedless. So what I'm going to do to make it weedless is I am going to take the front of the lure, I'm going to pinch it, I'm going to pull it forward, and then I'm going to push it up and then push it back. And that way the hook point is now buried into the plastic and it's going to be weedless. And when a fish bites down, it doesn't have that much plastic to go through. It's going to pop out. That hook is going to get exposed. The lure is going to slide down that hook. And that way you're going to have more hook exposed. You're going to be able to catch a lot more fish this way. You're going to have a much better hookup ratio than just driving that hook at a 45-degree angle through that plastic. Hey, now this one is for people like me that do not use these stretchy TPE lures a lot, but there are some profiles that I do like to use them in, but I don't like having different rigging options just for the TPE plastic, so I like using my regular Plastisol rigging hooks for these. Now, this is a twist lock. A lot of people don't realize that you can put these TPE plastics, these stretchy plastics, on these twist locks. You just have to rig them a little bit differently. So what you do to begin with this is you're going to take your soft plastic, your TPE, whatever brand that could be, Z-Man, this just happens to be a Z-Man. I'm going to take and drill a pilot hole with a hook point, just like that. We're going to go into the head of that lure with the hook point. Then I'm going to pull it out. Now, the twist lock that I like using, that is the centering pin. That is the one that's got that little pin on there. It makes it a lot easier. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to insert that pin into the head of the lure. And then we're going to continue pushing that lure all the way up, and we're going to cover that twist lock. So we're going to pinch it all the way up, and it's going to look like this. I've got the plastic that's actually covering that twist lock, and I'm holding it in between my finger and my thumb. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the hook. I'm not rotating the lure. And normally with plastic, you know, the soft plastics, you're going to twist it maybe 3 or 4 times and you're going to get it to the top. Well, with the Z-Man, you got to twist it a little bit more, but once you get it on there, it's locked into place. So right now I've got that twisted all the way up, and as you can see right there, that is a Z-Man on a twist lock. And the reason why I like doing this one, again, I don't like having a bunch of different rigging options for my soft plastics. I like to keep it simple. So you can't use these TPE lures on these twist locks. You just rig them a little bit differently. Now this tip's going to be for the people that use a lot of that TP material soft plastics, but every once in a while they use a plastisol, that's that normal plastic lures, and they don't want to change the rigging options. The issue with these is a lot of these hooks have that little lead keeper right there, and it works great for that TP material, but it tears up regular plastics. Now you don't have to go out there and buy new hooks. You can actually use these, but it takes a little bit of a modification. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some pliers, and we are going to take our hook right here. We're going to grab that little lead keeper with our pliers, and we're just going to twist it off just like that. Now what you've done is you've taken that little lead hook, that little lead keeper, and you've pulled it off. Now you can use your regular plastisol lures with it. You can rig them up there and it's not going to tear them up. So great little hack for you people out there that only use the plastisol lures on occasion, but you have a lot of these TP style hooks laying around. So this tip is for anybody that uses these light wire jig heads, typically like Ned rig style fishing. One thing bad about these jig heads is they've got a bad keeper on them. These keepers really don't hold the lure in place. And after a while, getting a couple of bites or, catching a few fish, these lures have a tendency to slide down that jig head. So the one good thing about this is because it's such a thin gauge of metal, what you can do is normally we start out by, putting that hook right there through the center of that the head of the soft plastic. So what we can do is we can actually move where we enter that hook either below the center or above the center, and we can get into some fresh plastic. So once we go ahead and thread this on and put it the way that we want it, go ahead and get this in place. What's going to happen is when I'm threading that hook through, I'm going through fresh plastic that has not been gone through yet, so it's going to grip a lot better. We've taken that same lure, and where it used to slide down that hook when we would cast, now it's going to stay in place because we got new plastic. And once this starts doing the same thing where it starts sliding down, you can actually take the hook point out, drive it through the bottom of the lure and have it come back out. And you can get several uses out of this same lure and not have to throw it away. So a little tip for you if you're using these jig heads. This one will save you a lot of money. Now here's a tip for you that's going to save you some money and some frustration. So these barbed jig heads, they do a really good job of keeping the lure in place. They're not going to let it slide down. But the problem is if you're dealing with a soft plastic that's got a tapered head on it like this, that tapered head is too small to fit over both these barbs, and a lot of times you can tear that soft plastic. So what you can do instead is you can actually take those barbs, take a pair of pliers, and you can smash the barbs down, or you can actually even remove one of these barbs. It's going to make that profile of that jig head a little bit smaller, but it's still going to have material to keep it in place. So when you go to rig this up and you slide the soft plastic on the tip of the point right there, let me go ahead and make sure I got that on there good. We're going to rig it up normally, and then when it comes to pushing the lure up on that jig head profile is smaller. You're going to be able to slide that tapered lure up on there. You're going to be able to get it on there, and it's not going to go anywhere. So that way you can still use those smaller profile lures on these jig heads and not go through so many of them. Now this tip is going to be for people that are trying to figure out when they should be using an open jig head or a weedless jig head. And to make it easy for you, anytime that you're out there on the water and you can get away with it, you always want to use an open jig head. And the reason why is the hookup ratio is going to be better. You're going to be able to put more fish in the boat using the open jig head. Now the reason why there is a weedless setup is if you're fishing around structure. A lot of times when we're fishing for these redfish, these snook, these trout, these flounder, they're going to be structure oriented, whether that be grass beds, whether it be docks, whether that be oysters, anything along those lines. And a lot of times an open jig head can get hung up around those. So that's when we go weedless. So only use weedless if you have to, but almost always your better bet is going to be an open jig head. So use this whenever you can. And the only time that you want to switch over to a weedless is if you're getting hung up. So if you are getting hung up on those docks or those mangroves or those oyster beds, that's when we want to switch over. So go this by default, use an open jig head by default, and only go to this when you have to. If you're liking these tips, make sure and click that little like button down below, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell button. That way when our new videos drop, you'll be the first ones to know. So here's a really common issue that I see when it's brand new people with soft plastics, especially weedless soft plastics, and that's not using the right size hook. So this is actually the right size hook. As you can tell, we've got a pretty good gap right there. And the reason why you want a larger gap is when that fish bites down on that lure, you want the lure to slide down. You want that hook point to be exposed. That way you get a good hook set. Now, if it is like this, where that hook is right there towards the bottom of that soft plastic, when that fish bites down on it, that lure doesn't really have very far to go, and that hook point doesn't stick out very far. You're going to miss a lot of hook sets this way. So the gap that we're looking for is about like that, which is roughly about the size of a pinky. I know everybody's got a different size finger and all, but if you can get your finger in there, that's a pretty good gap. If you can't get your finger in there, that is not enough. So make sure you're using the right size hooks when you're rigging these weedless soft plastics. So here's another tip for you. Anybody that's been fishing inshore saltwater for a while with soft plastics know that these pinfish and these pufferfish can actually pull these tails off. And when they do, don't stop using that lure. Keep using it. So if you take a paddle tail, and I've actually done this before a lot of times where I'll actually just pull that tail off, it turns this lure from a little paddle tail into a small jerk bait, and it completely changes the action in the water. And a lot of times this will actually catch more fish because it's really erratic when it goes through the water column. So if you're fishing in those saltwater flats and you have a pinfish that bites the tail off your paddle tail, don't throw it away. Keep using it. A lot of times you'll actually get more bites with it. So a little tip for you to save some extra money and not be wasteful on these lures. Here's a tip a lot of people don't know about. Whenever you're using a soft plastic lure on a jig head, inevitably what's going to happen is because of those barbs, every time you set that hook, after a while, the head of that lure is going to rip. It's going to tear, and you're not going to be able to rig that through the head anymore, but that doesn't mean you throw that lure away. It's still good. What I like to do with your shrimp imitations is I'll take and cut the tail section off right here, just like that, and then I'll take a weedless hook, a weedless rigging hook, and then I'll rig it on backwards. That way you've got a fresh rigging option right there. You got some fresh plastic back there. We'll go ahead and twist that on, and then we'll just bring our hook around and then rig it just like that. So now what happens is we've got this little nub right here, and this thing actually works great. A lot of people don't think about it. They think, you have to have the tail, the lure has to be intact and all that, but this little nub right here has caught me a ton of fish. And what happens is you still got that shrimp profile, and when a shrimp flees away from a fish, it's gonna flee kind of backwards. So it does look a little bit natural, but this darting motion attracts the predatory fish. And again, like I said, I've caught a lot of fish that way. And that way you're not throwing away that lure once that head gets tore up. You can still use it. So just another little tip there that's going to help you save some money and not waste those lures. So here's an organizational tip for you that'll help you out. So if you notice my jig head, there's one that's got a chartreuse eye, one that's got a little bit of a pearl eye, and one right there that's got a glow color. And the reason why they're different is because they are different sizes, and I can look at these jig heads and know at a quick glance what size they are. So my chartreuse is an 1/8 ounce, the pearl is a 3/16 ounce, and that glow is going to be a 1/4 ounce. And those are the three sizes that I use for inshore fishing. Now, the 1/8 ounce is easy to distinguish, but the 3/16 and the 1/4, they're pretty close. You really can't tell. When they're in the tackle box, they're grouped together and you kind of know, but if they're tied on a rod and I need to make an adjustment, say if I want to go heavier, if I want to go lighter, then I know what I've got on there and I can make that adjustment really quickly. Now, if you're not using jig heads that doesn't have the eyes on there, you can actually use different color jig heads. So say you can use chartreuse, you can use white, you can use red, maybe plain, it doesn't matter how you do it, but if you keep the sizes on the same colors, it's easier for you to make a quick reference and make those changes when you need to. So just a little quick tip for you, it helps with your organization. Now this is a tip for anybody that's using these weedless weighted rigging hooks like the Haas Helix right here. And if you notice, this weight right here is at the bottom, it's on the belly. Now that's only glued into place. You can actually slide that up and down and change the way that this lure falls. So all you have to do is just take a pair of pliers, grab that weight, and you can wiggle it back and forth, and then you can either slide it down further, the hook, and then if you slide it down further, what it's going to do is it's actually going to change the angle of that fall. And then as you tell, I slid that weight back a little bit further, and the further back you slide that weight, the more of a horizontal fall this is going to have. Now you can take that same weight and pull it all the way forward on the head. Now that it's forward, it's actually going to fall more straight up and down. Now I like using this trick on something that has a straight tail on it like this Prawn Junior, or maybe even a split tail jerk shad. That's going to have more of an effect on it. A paddle tail is going to fall straight up and down anyway, just because that paddle tail is going to cause resistance in the water and it's going to have a vertical fall. But with this one, with that straight tail, the further back you slide that weight, the more horizontal it's going to be, and the further forward you slide that weight, the more vertical it's going to be. So you can actually have different rates of fall or different types of fall with the same rigging option just by by sliding that weight. And then what you can do is once you get that weight to where you want it, you can take your pliers, crimp that lead, and it's going to stay where you want it to. So nice little hack for you if you want to change the way that that fall looks. Something that's got more of a horizontal fall, you're going to be able to cover a little bit more water just a little bit faster. And something that's got more of a vertical fall, that's when you want to fish vertical structure. If you're fishing dog pilings, you want that lure to fall straight up and down to stay close to the structure. But if you're fishing a grass flat, you might want more of a horizontal fall, and you can achieve that with using the same exact hook just by sliding that weight. So cool little tip for you. I'm going to show you a tip here that's going to show you how to take an open jig head and make it weedless just by using some leader material. So first we're going to do is we're going to take our leader material. We're going to use some strong stuff, 60 to 80 pounds, somewhere right around there. And we're going to cut it maybe about an inch long, inch and a quarter, really depends on the size of your jig head. And what I like to do, I know it's kind of hard to see this, but I like to cut this at an angle. If you can cut that tip at a 45-degree angle using some scissors, it works a little bit better to push that into that plastic. But here is where the magic happens. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this plastic, or excuse me, take the leader, and I'm gonna shove it at about a 45-degree angle into the soft plastic and kind of guide it in there to make sure it's going in the right direction. And there we go. So hopefully that comes out well on camera, but you can see I've got a leader right there that's sticking up in front of that hook. So any weeds that come by is going to get deflected from that the hook using that weed guard. Now this doesn't work in heavy weeded areas, but if you're dealing with some floating grass or any situation like that, some light weeds, that is going to help you out. You won't have to change your hook and go to weedless presentation. You could just do this and it's going to help you with that light grass. Now one thing that you can do to make this last a little bit longer is you can put a little drop of super glue right there. That's going to keep that weed guard in contact with that lure and not have it pull out whenever you're fighting a fish or whenever you're making that cast. So if you've never tried this before, this actually is a really cool tip. Now this tip's going to save you some money and you don't have to waste so many lures. What happens after a while, you catch a few fish on there, the hook point is not going to want to stay in place anymore. It's going to slide down. What we can do at this point is we can actually take the lure and we can rig it upside down, especially a paddle tail or something like that. It's not going to make that much of a difference. And when we go to rig this hook up, what we're going to do is we're actually going to get into some fresh plastic way back here, and then we can drive that hook through, and now that hook's going to stay in place. The lure's going to stay in place, and it's still going to be able to slide down, but it's not going to be in that wallered out plastic that's not holding it in place anymore. So if you have this situation, especially if you're running low on a certain lure that's hot that day, don't necessarily throw that lure away. You can actually rig it upside down, and it doesn't matter if you're using a paddle tail, if you're using shrimp imitation, stick bait, these are going to work upside down. It really doesn't matter. And this way you can get more fish out of each one of the lures, and it's going to save you a lot of money and you're not going to be wasteful that way. So great little tip there. Here's a tip that is going to extend the life out of these soft plastics so you can get some more use out of them, you're going to save some money, and you're not wasting them. So if you rig these weedless, anybody that's been doing this for a while understands that after you catch a few fish, the little plastic groove that's up here that you've been putting the hook into, well, after a while it's not holding your hook and it just keeps sliding down, and your hook is always exposed and you're getting hung up on the weeds. So instead of changing your lures out, this is a trick you can do. Just go ahead and pull that hook out, and I always have a lighter on me, a cigarette lighter on me. Not that I smoke, but it's just for this tip right here. So if I'm going to, have to mend some of these soft plastics, and this works really well if you're getting down there, the last couple of lures that are in the bag that are being productive that day, you can heat that plastic up. You're melting that plastic, and then you can just kind of push it together a little bit. And what we want to do is we want to let that dry. This is going to be hot, so be careful, don't burn yourself, and give it a little bit of time. And then what you can do is now you can go ahead and re-rig that, and because you melted that plastic, it's like having new plastic right there. So it is ready to go. It's going to be weedless, and you're going to get some more use out of it. This is a great tip that can save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and you can make a pack of lures last a long time. Now, one thing I will say, this does work better with the plastisol lures, which is the normal plastic. It can work on TPE, but I find that it does work better with a plastisol. But this is a great little tip for you that can save you some money. Now, before we get to this last tip, I just want to let you know, if you're struggling at catching inshore fish like redfish, snook, sea trout, and flounder, we can help you out. We have a whole system. It's not just about an app like our Smart Fishing Spots app. It's not just about our community of 60,000 people. It's not just about the tackle we have and the tackle discounts. It's a whole system. We can teach you from start to finish how to catch more fish. And it doesn't matter your experience level. If you are a beginner or if you've been fishing for a very long time, we can help you out. So check us out at saltstrong.com, and I'll put a link in the description. This tip is for the people that want to customize their soft plastics, or maybe your soft plastic that you like doesn't come in a color that you want. Could be a couple different reasons, but what I like to do is use these dye markers. These are made by Spike It. I've got a couple different colors. This one happens to be chartreuse. But let's say you want to dress up your lure a little bit, you're out there and you just want to add a little extra attention to it, or maybe you want to just put a little flash on there. Or again, like I said, maybe your favorite lure doesn't come in a specific color. You can just take this dye marker and dye any part of this soft plastic that you want to. And this kit comes in different colors. I've got blue in here, there's red, there's orange, there's chartreuse. And there's other colors, but this just happens to be what I have. But what you can do is you can just add whatever. So I've got a lure here that doesn't come available with a chartreuse tail, but I just made it have a chartreuse tail. But you can take and color the eyes in, you can put some gills in there, whatever you want to do. So this is a nice little tip there. If you've never done this before and you like to customize your stuff, this is great. Now, one word of warning is this only works on your regular plastic plastisol lures. It does not work on the TPE, which is like your Z-Man material, that really stretchy stuff. It's not going to stick to that, but it does work well with this one. So if you want to add a little pizzazz, a little flair to your lure, or you have a lure that doesn't come in the color that you want, definitely check this out. These are called dye pins, and they're made by Spike It. That's just one company. There's others out there, but it works really well. So I want to thank you for hanging out to the very end of this video, and I'd like to know from you in the comments, which one was your favorite tip? Which ones did you learn that you didn't know before? And is there something that you would like to add? Put those down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. So as always, I really do appreciate you watching, and I hope your next day on the water is going to be a great one.